Viewer discretion is advised. The following content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. According to a report from Inner City Press, what happened in federal court during the Sean Diddy Combs trial caught everyone off guard. No one expected Jim Carrey to appear, his name wasn't on any list, and reporters weren't prepared. But when he walked into the courtroom, quiet, serious, and without his trademark smile, the entire room fell silent. Carrey, known for his wild characters and infectious energy, wasn't there to entertain. He was there to share something deeply personal. What he said on the witness stand wasn't just shocking, it was heartbreaking. With a shaky voice, Carrey admitted there were things in his past he still couldn't speak about without trembling. He said his rise to fame wasn't based on talent alone, but on going along with things he now regrets, things overseen by one man, Sean Diddy Combs. He described chilling scenes, candlelit rituals, ice-filled bathtubs, and a group of powerful Hollywood figures who stood by while he was initiated. It didn't sound like standard courtroom testimony. It felt more like a personal reckoning, a release. There were no cameras rolling. No one had saved him a seat. But when Jim Carrey walked through those courtroom doors that morning, everything stopped. The man once known for his rubbery expressions and comic energy looked nothing like his usual self. Dressed in a black coat and sunglasses, his face was serious, almost unrecognizable. It was so quiet in the courtroom you could feel the tension shift. Even the most seasoned reporters looked uneasy. Jim Carrey wasn't smiling. He wasn't cracking jokes. He walked in slowly, like someone about to do something incredibly difficult. The room, already heavy with the weight of Sean Diddy Combs' trial, froze. Even the judge glanced up from his papers. One of the bailiffs leaned over and quietly told the prosecutor, "Jim Carrey is here to testify." The words hit the room like a shockwave. No one had expected this. Carrey held a manila folder tightly under his arm, like something he'd been carrying literally and emotionally for years. His steps were steady and purposeful. Diddy turned in his seat to look at him. At first he seemed confused, but as Jim walked closer to the witness stand, Diddy's expression changed. Recognition, maybe even fear. "I'm not here for revenge," Jim said quietly, removing his sunglasses as he approached. "I'm here to say things I've never said out loud." He was sworn in. Then he sat down, took a deep breath, and looked out at the courtroom. For the first time in the trial, everyone wasn't waiting on a lawyer or a witness from the list. They were waiting on a man who had spent a lifetime making people laugh, finally stepping out from behind that mask. His voice was low but clear. "I've done things I can't even talk about without my voice shaking," he said. And Sean Combs was at the center of it. You could feel the air leave the room. No one moved. A few people covered their mouths. One juror looked away. Jim gripped the edge of the witness stand tightly. "What I saw, what I was told to do, what I agreed to, thinking it was part of the price for success, it still haunts me." The judge leaned in, signaling him to go on. What Jim Carrey said next would soon dominate headlines. But in that moment, the courtroom wasn't thinking about the news. They were watching a man unravel decades of silence and finally speak his truth. What the courtroom saw wasn't a performance. It was a man shaking as he finally spoke out after decades of silence. The tension didn't ease for a second. No one spoke. No one even shifted in their seat. Jim Carrey, pale and visibly shaken, had just said what many in Hollywood had long feared he might. "I was funny, but that wasn't enough." He took everyone back to the late 80s and early 90s, when he was still hustling in LA, performing in every small comedy club that would have him. "I did impressions, slapstick, whatever got a laugh," he said. "I just wanted to make it, and I was told there were people who could help." Carrey said the first signs came as party invitations, exclusive ones, sent through a go-between. He described being invited to a house in the Hollywood Hills, owned by someone powerful. He later found out that person was Sean Combs. "I didn't even know who he was at the time," Jim said. "He was new in music, but people were saying he was going places, and that he had pull not just in music but in movies too." Then the offers started. Carrey said he was told that if he wanted to be noticed, if he wanted a real shot, he'd need to attend certain parties, meet the right people, and, if asked, go along with what was happening. "At first I thought it was just networking, talking to the right people," he said. "But then I was told straight up, if I wanted access to certain auditions, I'd have to go through Diddy." That's when Jim Carrey's voice faltered, just for a moment. "And I did," he said. "I went through him." The courtroom stayed silent. You could feel the weight of his words. Jim recalled a phone call from a manager he had dreamed of working with. The manager told him a major role was opening up and that he was funny, but others were ahead of him unless he made a key connection. That connection led him to an encounter with Sean "Diddy" Combs. "This wasn't a meeting. It wasn't business," Carrey said quietly. "It was something else." Then he said the words that made the entire courtroom freeze. "I bathed with Sean Combs to get a role." Even the court stenographer hesitated as she typed. Carrey described being brought to a high-end suite where Diddy was already waiting. He remembered every detail. Soft lights, candles, a filled bathtub. "They told me it was a cleansing ritual," he said. "That if I wanted to be taken seriously in this industry, I had to let go of who I used to be." He looked down, his voice tight. "It was humiliating, but I did it because I thought that's what it took." The judge allowed the testimony to continue, saying it was relevant in showing a potential pattern of coercion. Carrey clarified that no threats were ever made outright, but the pressure was undeniable. "It wasn't, 'do this or else,'" he explained. "It was more like, 'do this or disappear.' I felt like this was the only door in, and Sean Combs was the doorman." Then he paused and said something that hit the courtroom hard. "Hollywood didn't just break me. It made me wonder, did he own me?" By that point, even the most skeptical people in the room struggled to keep a neutral expression. Few ever imagined Jim Carrey, known for his wild humor and larger-than-life characters, would be testifying about something so raw and disturbing. But his tone was steady. His words were clear. There was no ambiguity in what he was saying. He described how, once in the suite, he was told to remove his clothes and step into the tub where Combs was already waiting. He smiled like it was normal, Jim said. Then he said, "This is how the great are born. You leave your old self in the water. In a stunning turn of events at the federal trial of Sean "Diddy" Combs, actor Jim Carrey took the stand, delivering a testimony that left the courtroom in stunned silence. Known for his comedic roles, Carrey's appearance was anything but typical. Dressed in a black overcoat and sunglasses, he exuded an air of seriousness that immediately commanded attention. Carrey began by revealing that his rise to fame wasn't solely due to his talent. He described a series of unsettling experiences that began in the late 1980s. While struggling in Los Angeles, performing stand-up comedy, he was introduced to Sean Combs through an intermediary. At the time, Carrey was unaware of Combs' influence in both the music and film industries. Carrey recounted an invitation to a private gathering at a mansion in the Hollywood Hills, where he met Combs. He was told that to advance in his career, he needed to attend certain events and meet specific individuals. Initially, Carrey thought this was standard networking, but he soon realized it was something more. The most shocking revelation came when Carrey disclosed that he had participated in a ritualistic bath with Combs, believing it to be a metaphorical cleansing to advance in the industry. He described the setting as a luxury suite with candles and a bathtub filled with water. Carrey was instructed to remove his clothes and enter the bath, where Combs was already waiting. During the bath, Combs asked personal questions about Carrey's family, fears, and limits, making Carrey feel as though he was being tested for his willingness to conform. The ordeal culminated with Carrey being asked to wash Combs' back. He complied, feeling pressured by the situation and the presence of others who acted as though this was a normal part of the industry. Afterward, Carrey was handed a robe, a script for the cable guy, a bottle of champagne, and a note that read, "Welcome to the next level." Carrey admitted that while no explicit threats were made, the implied pressure was undeniable. He felt that this was the only path to success, and that refusal would mean fading into obscurity. He now views this experience as a loss of his dignity, something he has been trying to reclaim ever since. This testimony adds a new layer to the ongoing trial, highlighting the alleged coercive tactics used by Combs to manipulate individuals in the entertainment industry. While Carrey's account doesn't constitute a criminal act by legal standards, it paints a troubling picture of the lengths some may go to in order to succeed in Hollywood. As the trial continues, more individuals are expected to testify, shedding light on the darker aspects of the entertainment industry. The revelations thus far have prompted many to reconsider the true cost of fame and the power dynamics that exist behind the scenes. Phones were taken away at the entrance, and everyone was asked to sign non-disclosure agreements before entering. Once inside, everything felt unreal. People wore masks, models, athletes, directors, but nobody spoke each other's names. They just nodded, as if everyone was playing a role. The house wasn't set up like a normal party. Instead, it was a maze of dimly lit hallways and rooms hidden behind heavy curtains. Music played quietly from hidden speakers. I expected a casual gathering where people talked about their projects, but that didn't happen. Instead, someone offered me a tray of pills and quietly said, "Choose your night." I refused, but I stayed because I was afraid to leave. I thought walking away might end my chances in the industry. Then things got serious. People were being led into different rooms, men and women. Some seemed calm, others scared. I asked what was happening, and I was told, "This is the next part." At one point, I saw a young woman come out of a room crying, clutching her dress. No one helped her or even looked. It was like everyone had been trained to ignore what was going on. Later, I walked into a back room and saw a well-known comedian lying unconscious on a sofa. Around him were several people laughing and taking photos. At the center of all this was Diddy. He moved from room to room, watching and making sure everything was going as planned. This wasn't just a party, it felt more like a ritual. The price to enter was giving up your sense of right and wrong. I kept going back to different places with the same setup. Everything I saw, every deal, every person I was told to keep quiet about, all pointed back to him. The rules were strict, and the same kinds of people showed up every time. Models, executives, influencers, and actors, usually those just about to get their big break. They targeted you when you were most vulnerable, right before you blew up and still needed their support. Jim shared a story from 2001 about bringing another actor to one of these events. He didn't name him, but said, "You know his face. He's in every comedy you love." That actor left halfway through the night and never went back. Years later, Jim got a message from him saying, "Thanks for not stopping me from leaving. I was about to lose my soul." Then came the unsettling part. There were people placed at every level, not just to throw parties, but to watch and gather information. They monitored who followed the rules, who played along, and who needed a reminder that silence was safer than speaking up. Jim named agents, producers, and even a studio executive who often showed up at these events. They were there to observe and sometimes left with tapes or contracts, but deals weren't made in boardrooms. They happened late at night, in private spaces. One of Jim's darkest memories was from a 2003 party at a New York penthouse hosted by Diddy. He saw a well-known filmmaker take a young performer into a private room. Jim knew the kid had just signed a record deal and looked terrified. No one stopped what was happening, not even Jim himself. He said he's carried guilt for not doing more, telling himself it was just how the industry worked. But it wasn't, and it never should have been. The courtroom felt heavy, like it wasn't just a trial anymore, but a moment of truth. Jim said, "I'm here to say this under oath because I don't want to be part of it anymore. I don't want to sit in interviews talking about Ace Ventura while pretending I didn't see the darkness behind the scenes." And he made it clear who he held responsible: Sean Combs. Some people in the courtroom were visibly shaken. One juror even had tears in her eyes. The judge called for a short 5-minute break, but Jim insisted on continuing. "I want to finish," he said quietly. "I've been silent for too long." The prosecutor gave a small nod, and Jim took a deep breath before sharing the hardest part of all: why he stayed quiet for so long. "I didn't speak up because I thought I was crazy," he said. "That's exactly how they make you feel, like you dreamed it all or misunderstood everything. And if you try to talk about it, people label you paranoid or broken." He talked about struggling inside for years, even after big movies like Bruce Almighty and Eternal Sunshine. Even after Yes Man, he was smiling on red carpets while feeling like he was falling apart inside. "People would tell me, 'You've got it all,'" he said. "But I'd go home and just stare at the wall for hours because I knew how I got it, and I couldn't live with that." Jim said when he finally tried to open up. To agents, therapists, even close friends, most just avoided the conversation. They'd say things like, "That's just how it is," or worse, "Don't dig into that. It's dangerous." Then he described the nightmares. "I'd dream about those rooms, the parties, the bathtub. I'd wake up soaked in sweat, feeling like I was still there. My mind kept replaying it, trying to change the story, but it never did." He confessed he began to blame himself, thinking maybe he had agreed to it, maybe he'd chosen this path. But after hearing other witnesses like Cassie Ventura and Monique, something clicked. They weren't crazy. Neither was I. We were made to feel that way. That's how the whole system keeps going. The courtroom hung on his every word. Jim's voice cracked as he said, "I stayed silent because I was scared. Scared I'd lose everything. Scared they'd come after me. Scared no one would believe me. And scared that if I told the truth, I'd be confirming a nightmare everyone wants to forget." He paused, then added, "But I'm not afraid anymore." By this point, the courtroom felt less like a courtroom and more like a place where something long hidden was finally being exposed. No one shuffled papers or whispered. Every eye was on Jim Carrey, the man who once brought joy to millions, now telling a story that shook the very heart of the entertainment world. He adjusted the microphone, his hands steady now, his voice calm and clear, almost like he'd been preparing for this moment his whole life. "There's a list," he said. Jim explained there wasn't a physical list, no paper or document to hand over. But everyone in Hollywood knew the list existed, an unspoken truth. It was about the people who always showed up at these parties, who never blinked when things got dark, and who protected Diddy because protecting him meant protecting themselves. At first, Jim didn't name names directly. Instead, he described a pattern: the same faces at every event, the same director, the same handler, big-name actors with squeaky clean reputations who were always there when the cameras weren't. They weren't just guests, they were gatekeepers. Then, he began naming some of the people he saw. He said an Oscar-winning actor, known for playing moral heroes, was at backroom initiations. A major daytime talk show host was present during an incident where a young dancer passed out and had to be carried out, and no one called for help. He also named a well-known music producer who brought new people to the parties, promising careers in exchange for silence. But when Jim returned to Diddy, the room went completely silent. Diddy wasn't just at the top of the list. Jim said he made the list. He didn't just benefit from the system, he created it. Jim said Diddy would move through the rooms, introducing the right people, giving subtle nods that meant someone was safe or in. These moments were like rituals, silent agreements where trust was built through shared secrecy. Jim recalled a moment from 2005. I was at an estate party. The upper floors were off limits. Someone handed me a key card and said, VIP only. I went upstairs and saw a room full of masks, not just for style, but to hide who people really were. In that room were 5 names you'd know instantly: top directors, A-list actors, and powerful executives. And right in the middle of it all was Diddy. Jim said these people weren't just there to party. They were watching, studying others, deciding who could be trusted or used. The higher you went in that house, the lower people's morals fell. He looked straight at the jury. These weren't random events. They were planned, and Diddy was the one running the show. If Jim's earlier testimony was steady and honest, what came next broke him completely. He paused so long the judge almost asked if he needed a break. Then, with his eyes fixed somewhere beyond the courtroom, Jim started crying. This part was the hardest to say, he said, voice trembling. It sounds crazy, but it's true. And I've carried it inside me for too long. He leaned forward, gripping the stand. You don't get famous in this town without getting touched. Maybe not physically, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Someone has to get inside you, break something, and then reshape you in their image. The courtroom was silent, hanging on his words. I thought I could avoid it by being the funny guy, harmless. But to move up, from comic to lead actor, I had to pass through fire. And the one who lit that fire was Sean Combs. He then began naming the lasting wounds, panic attacks, old scars that never healed, evidence of the damage that was done.